The time for silence is over.
But are you willing tonight to condemn white supremacists and militia groups?
I came here to speak on behalf of Donald Trump.
Do it, sir.
Say it. Do it. Say it. You want to call them, what do you want to call them? Very fine people on both sides.
And for the white Christian people of this nation.
Give me a name. Give me a
White
name.
supremacists and
white
supremacists and right
Proud
militia.
Boys, stand back and stand by.
In fourth degree, you get arrested or in a serious violent fight for the cause.
Really?
Yes. I'm taking the low road. I'm punching them in the face.
So that.
I attacked a couple guys.
Very fine people on both sides.
So I punched him in the face and I ripped his mask off. And then I punched him again.
President Trump retweeted a video showing a supporter making a racist statement.
White power! White power!
Very fine people on both sides.
Did Hitler do anything wrong? No!
Fuck no!
First precept of the truth of life. Remember it. Yes, the
Let's have trial by combat. And after this, we're going to walk down, and I'll be there with you. We're going to walk down to the Capitol.
Are you willing tonight to condemn white supremacists, right
Proud
militia?
Boys, stand back and stand by.
Because you'll never take back our country with weakness. You have to show strength, and you have to be strong.
Join me every Sunday afternoon for a new show where common citizens, you and I together, discuss with each other issues of today, where we demand proof and evidence is required, where we seek the truth and will not be silent. Join me this coming Sunday afternoon and take part in America's oldest and most honored tradition. Hello and welcome to The Left Speaks. As always, my name is Chris and I will be your host today, May the 30th, approximately 5 months, 6 days short of 5 months, removed from the insurrection attempt at the United States Capitol building to delay, obstruct, and hopefully overturn the confirmation of election results that said that Joe Biden won the presidential election and former President Donald Trump lost it. A constitutionally mandated process for which the Republican Party in the United States Senate has now filibustered, stopped a bipartisan investigation set up to find the results. Good afternoon, Miss Barbara. I appreciate you being here. Dash Mickey, our mod, as always, thank you for being here as well. We're going to rehash a little bit of old territory. We've already done an episode on the insurrection. But now that Republicans have shot down, or blocked, rather, a bipartisan investigation into the insurrection attempt, we're going to look at potential reasons why, what the American people overall seem to want, how that does not align with what the Republican Party is currently doing, and why, what the potential motivations could be for Republicans blocking this investigation. Honestly, the last several months have centered around the insurrection attempt. I think that is a perfectly reasonable and justifiable position to hold, considering that the United States Capitol building has not been out of control of the federal government since the War of 1812, when the British came over and burned it to the ground. And I don't think anybody thinks that the United States government was in control of the Capitol building during the insurrection attempt. We can point directly to President Trump's lies about election fraud and motivating these people to go storm the Capitol building. We can point directly to President Trump setting the date for all of his supporters to come to the Capitol or to come to Washington, D.C. We can point directly to President Trump telling his supporters during his speech to march down to the United States Capitol building. We know that President Trump provided the motive. We know that President Trump set the date of when everybody was going to show up. We know that President Trump told his supporters to march down there directly to the Capitol building. Those facts are not in dispute. I don't care whether you want to say he said the word peacefully one time and it overrides the fact that he said the word fight for your democracy or fight 6 or 7 times. Those 3 things, motive, means, opportunity. He set the date for everybody to show up. He told them where to go. And he provided the lies that provided the justification for these people to go down there. Are very clear. Republicans have blocked investigation into this at multiple different opportunities. They blocked consequences when in the Senate they declined to uphold the impeachment that the House had passed against former President Donald Trump. They have provided excuse after excuse of why we should not look into this any further. And I don't think any of them hold up. After 9/11, we had a bipartisan commission, equal Republicans and Democrats, running a committee with subpoena power, both of governmental employees and regular American citizens, to figure out where our systems and our various departments had failed and what had allowed the 9/11 attacks to occur. This was an attack on a constitutionally mandated process. We had multiple federal, state, and local institutions involved where quite obviously security failed. And as a result, a constitutionally mandated process that is key to American democracy was threatened. Why, if you love this country, would you oppose an investigation into it? An investigation with 5 Republicans and 5 Democrats, with a Democratic head, president of this committee, and a Republican vice president of this committee, where the majority of members of this committee would have to agree to subpoena anybody, or the Democratic president of the committee and the Republican vice president of the committee would have to agree to subpoena. Where you would have to have bipartisan, both parties would have to agree which direction this investigation would go so that it could not turn into a political witch hunt. You had multiple investigations, if you're a Republican, into the failure to defend the embassy in Benghazi. An overseas United States embassy. I'll grant you it was a direct attack on U.S. soil, because embassies are considered U.S. soil. But it was not the same thing as a direct attack on our democracy. And the vast majority of Republicans supported multiple investigations into Secretary Hillary Clinton at the time. And all of the events around Benghazi. This was a direct attack on a constitutionally mandated process. A foundational process to American democracy. You're not going to convince me to sweep it under the rug. You're not going to convince me to ignore it. You're not going to convince me that those who had any part in it should not bear responsibility for their parts in it. You're not going to convince me to quit talking about it before the 2022 elections or the 2024 elections. And there will be no unity until there is accountability for those who attacked our democracy. I am not willing to compromise on this. I am not willing to negotiate about democracy. I'm not willing to compromise which votes matter or which elections should count or whether these crimes were somehow justifiable or whether the people who did it just went in on their own. I want a full investigation, and I want to hold everybody accountable who had a part in this. And if I have to wait until 2022, fuck it, we'll do it then. If I have to wait until 2024, I'll do it then. If we have to do it without Republican help, we'll do it that way. But if there are no consequences, none, for storming the United States Capitol building, seizing control of the United States Capitol from the federal government during the confirmation of a presidential election, well, then the people that did it learned that there are no consequences for that. So why don't they try again? Just like when you're dealing with a child, because the people who storm the Capitol obviously believe in fantasies. If there are no consequences, the behavior gets worse. It doesn't go away. So this episode is going to move fairly quickly because there's a lot of ground to cover. We're going to look at some of the individual motivations. We're going to look at the online presence and how these people were recruited and the messages that were sent out. We're going to look at the arguments that Republicans in the Senate are currently giving for why there's no need for an investigation. We're going to listen to Senator Mitch McConnell. I know. Sorry. We're going to listen to Senator Chuck Schumer's response to Senator McConnell. It is blatantly false. And if you have to rewrite history to support your position, that's unacceptable. So let's dive right into it. This is what Republicans are ultimately hoping to create and responses to them.
This hearing is called the Capitol Insurrection. Let's be honest with the American people. It was not an insurrection, and we cannot call it that and be truthful. The House floor was never breached. And it was not an insurrection.
While we're here, we might as well set up a government.
Hey, let's take a seat, people!
But let me be clear. There was no insurrection, and to call it an insurrection, in my opinion, is a bold-faced lie.
At 2:07, a mob of Trump supporters breached the steps. I don't know who did a poll that is Trump supporters.
There's a fucking million of us out there, and we are listening to Trump. Your boss. It's sad. It's sad.
I've repeatedly asked for the Capitol footage from before and during January 6th. Such footage would provide answers, could contain exculpatory evidence regarding the outrageous accusations against members of Congress, and most importantly, exonerate the many Americans who peacefully protested and never set foot in the Capitol.
Democrats have said the events of the Capitol on January 6th were an assault on our democracy.
Is this the city? Where the fuck are they? Where are they?
And if that's true, if disorderly conduct in a restricted building is an assault on democracy. While we're here, we might as well set up a government.
Hey, let's take a seat, people! Let's take a seat! Hey, Nancy Pelosi. Let's vote on some shit! Where the fuck is Nancy?
Then what do we call setting fire to a federal court in Portland, Oregon, where people inside, what do we call that?
Well, guess what? America showed up!
19 people died during BLM riots last year. Hundreds and hundreds were injured. 2,000 police officers were injured from BLM riots last year. And yet, we're going to discuss today, as if none of that happened, the events of January the 6th. The hypocrisy of this body is indeed disturbing.
Treason! 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 Treason!
From Barbara, it makes me ill that the people in power have no conscience, that serving the country has turned them into self-serving hypocrites. I completely agree. To sit there and pretend like this was not a direct assault on our democracy because the House floor was not penetrated, when, as we saw, the Senate floor was, which also happens to be, where everybody, House and Senate, was meeting to confirm the election. They met there. They were going to hold their vote. And then when the objection happened to the validity of the state of Arizona, they were going to go back to their respective chambers. So it would make sense if I wanted to commit a coup to try and catch them all in the one location. To pretend like this wasn't an attack on our democracy. Maybe I have better hearing than those gentlemen, but I specifically hear them chanting treason over and over and over again. To pretend like this wasn't Trump supporters. Maybe I have better eyes than the average congressman or senator, but I saw a whole lot of MAGA flags and a whole lot of MAGA hats and a whole lot of Trump 2020 flags. I don't recall seeing a single one for Biden. Maybe I have a better memory than these Republican congressmen and Republican senators. But I don't remember Joe Biden or any Democrats or Antifa telling their supporters to show up on January the 6th and storm the Capitol building to stop the confirmation of an election that they won. No, that was President Trump. And serving in Congress, you get access for free to the best health care America has to offer. So if you are that blind, go get new glasses. If you are that deaf, go get a hearing aid. You don't have an excuse. Hey, Liquor, welcome back in. Appreciate you dropping by. It's going good so far. We just started, so you're more than in time. Now, to quick recap, for those who are unaware of the evidence that Trump's bold-faced lies about election fraud are bullshit, those claims went to court 60 plus times in multiple different states in front of multiple different judges. Some of those judges were appointed by Democratic presidents and legislatures and senates. Some of those judges were appointed by Republicans. Some of those judges were directly appointed by President Trump himself. He failed but in all of one of those cases. In the state of Pennsylvania, before the election was finished being counted, the Republican election observers, the people who watched the counting, both parties have them there, said, we're currently standing 12 feet away. We think it's too far. We would like to stand closer to watch people count. And the Pennsylvania court said, we think that's reasonable. Both the Republican and the Democratic observers can move from 12 feet away to 6 feet away so they can see a little bit more clearly. The one case that President Trump and his ridiculous legal team won doesn't show that a single ballot was changed, does not show that a single ballot was counted improperly, does not show that a single ballot was added or not counted or fraudulently cast or anything along those lines. All it confirms is that the Pennsylvania court thought that 12 feet was a little bit too far for people who might need new eyeglasses to see what people were counting, and that they could move up to 6 feet. The historical rate of election fraud in this country is 0.0009% per the Brennan Center for Justice. You can find isolated cases here and there of 2 or 3 or maybe 5 ballots that were questionable. But you have a better chance of being struck by lightning than you do of finding election fraud. And let's clarify this. Trump's claim isn't that election fraud exists. I agree. There are some cases, minor, very few, of election fraud. Trump's claim is that massive, multiple statewide, covering dozens to hundreds of counties, dozens to hundreds of polling locations within those counties, were all in on a conspiracy to add enough votes or change enough votes that it cost him the election. Now, to put this on equal footing, I agree that some Americans get struck by lightning. I don't think enough Americans get struck by lightning to change the outcome of a presidential election. I don't think it's anywhere close to that. Considering you are more likely to be struck by lightning than you are to have somebody else next to you cast a fraudulent ballot. I don't see a case for massive, multiple statewide election fraud. I am open to evidence for said case, but anytime anybody sends me anything, and you can go to any of the previous episodes covering election fraud, it's always ridiculous. We had John Pulitzer, a gentleman down in Georgia, who testified to the Georgia State Senate that since he could connect to a public Wi-Fi network in a building and connect to a television via Wi-Fi that was manufactured in China, that somehow this proves that China was influencing the election results in Georgia. I have a television in my house that has Wi-Fi connectivity. My television is not a voting machine. I don't vote in my TV. The presidential election isn't fucking American Idol. The voting machines weren't connected to the Wi-Fi networks. If I go in a stadium, Las Vegas Raiders Stadium, if I go to a college campus to vote, I am not going to be shocked if the college provides free Wi-Fi to people. I am not going to be shocked if the college has TVs that were manufactured in the last, 10 years. That has absolutely nothing to do with ballot machines or voting machines or people counting ballots. I don't care if the televisions that they bought that are, less than 10 years old were manufactured in China, Japan, South Korea, the United States. It's irrelevant. Georgia audited their election results 3 times. Once by hand. And it matched up constantly. So unless somebody can provide evidence of this massive multi-statewide conspiracy, not claims that it happened, evidence that it happened, then it's a load of bullshit. And apparently, if you believe this, the Democratic Party was so competent that it could get the hundreds of people necessary, because you would need hundreds of people in multiple states, right? In multiple county locations, multiple counters at these counties and these locations of ballots, the people who had to fill out these ballots, or the people that had to program the machines, right? So apparently the Democratic Party had to be so competent to pull off this fraud that they managed to leave no evidence, no emails between, different Democrats in different states, or the guy at the top telling them what they had to do, right? No emails or text messages or calls from Joe Biden to so-and-so saying, hey, we need you to do this on this date at this location. None of the poll watchers apparently had a fucking cell phone. Pardon the language, the absurdity is pulling it out of me. If you've had a cell phone manufactured in the last 15, 20 years, it's got a camera. Hell, Nowadays, some of them have 3. But we couldn't get evidence or a recorded phone call or a video of somebody saying, hey, you need to go alter all these ballots. We could just get more nebulous claims about it existing. And I've said this before and I'll say it again. When you have evidence greater than the existence of aliens abducting people from this planet for massive multi-statewide election fraud conspiracy, I will be happy to hear it. You can go to Twitter. You can direct message me whatever links you think you have that proves this case. That apparently every judge misunderstood, missed, couldn't comprehend, or was in on it about. And I will go through and look at it. In good faith, I've had stuff sent to me from PJ Media in Pennsylvania again, where they found some ballots that were tossed out before the election, absentee. It was 5 ballots. The FBI showed up to investigate what happened. I don't know what else you want at that point. If you steal $5 from the grocery store, the FBI doesn't show up to investigate. If you lose 5 checks at your boss's business, you're going to get fired, odds are, but the FBI is not going to show up to investigate. But if you lose 5 of these envelopes, the FBI starts knocking on the door. How much more seriously do you want me to take this? From Licorice, are you reading what you've pre-written? It's almost interesting. The cadence is almost preacher-like. Well, I'm not a preacher. And no, absolutely nothing on this show is pre-written. It is all live. It is all unscripted. All of the calls are generic, or whoever just happens to call in. That's why I limit the show calls to today's topic and the previous topic, because I don't want to get blindsided out of the blue. If anybody wants to go over anything specifically, they can shoot me via Twitter or the website, theleftspeaks.com. They can email me their source. They can tweet it at me. They can link it to me via Facebook, and I'll be happy to go over it the next week. But I do have to screen sources now after somebody dropped some Daily Stormer links in here, so I don't go over stuff randomly on stream. But yes, everything is unscripted. Everything is always live. And while I do my research before the episode, I do not write out a script. This is for notes during a call if there's something I want to circle back to with somebody. From Barbara, yet here we are looking for bamboo in Arizona. I completely agree. For those of you who are unaware, part of the Arizona GOP investigation into election fraud in Arizona, one of the theories is that there are ballots that were sent from China and that they would contain bamboo because apparently Chinese people don't know how to make ballots without, or how to make paper without including bamboo, which is beyond me. And that we could find all of the fake votes because they would contain bamboo within the paper. I know it sounds ludicrous. They're actually looking for this shit. I agree it's ludicrous. So, why don't we want to look into this? What is the Republican answer for not needing to look into the insurrection? Let's go to currently one of the 2 most powerful Republican officials that currently holds office. Senator Mitch McConnell.
Now, Mr. President, on one final matter, after careful consideration, I've made the decision to oppose the House Democrats' slanted and unbalanced proposal for another commission to study the events of January the 6th. As everybody surely knows, I repeatedly made my views about the events of January the 6th very clear. I spoke clearly and left no doubt about my conclusions. Federal law enforcement have made at least 445 arrests and counting relating to crimes committed that day. Hundreds of those people have been charged. Law enforcement investigations are ongoing, and federal authorities say they expect to arrest at least 100 or so more. Bipartisan investigations are also underway and have been for months at the committee level here in the Senate. So there has been, and there will continue to be no shortage of robust investigations by two separate branches of the federal government. So, Mr. President, it's not at all clear what new facts or additional investigation yet another commission could actually lay on top of existing efforts by law enforcement and Congress.
So you've got two central points there. Okay. One of them is a congressional level bipartisan committee is unnecessary because law enforcement is already investigating this, and because there are several different bipartisan investigations at the committee level in the House and the Senate. Okay, so we'll knock out the second one first. The Committee on Intelligence in the United States, or Foreign Affairs, or that would manage the Bureau of Land Management. Pick whatever committee you want. They have a limited scope. If I'm talking about the Committee on Ways and Means, then I'm talking about how to pay for things. I can't look at the overarching picture. I can look at my area. I want a full accounting of what happened. I don't want to know just how one state handled it, or just how the District of Columbia handled it from the Committee on the District of Columbia. I want to know everything I can know about the insurrection attempt. Second, law enforcement is already investigating this. Law enforcement was also investigating 9/11. We still had a federal level committee, bipartisan, established on 9/11. Congress has the power to subpoena people that law enforcement can't necessarily subpoena. Congress has the authority to bring people in to testify that law enforcement doesn't necessarily have the power to do that with. The perfect example for the 9/11 committee, former President Clinton testified to the 9/11 committee. President at the time, George Bush, Vice President Dick Cheney, testified to the 9/11 committee. National Security Advisor Condoleezza Rice tried to get out of testifying and still ended up having to testify to the 9/11 committee. These are people that the DC police can't walk into the Oval Office and say, hey, Mr. President, hey, Mr. Former President, you need to come down to the precinct and the station and talk to us about your role in this. As for Mitch McConnell's opinion that we don't know, or he doesn't know, what a bipartisan committee would add to the investigation or why it's necessary, that's the investigation part of it. You investigate to see what they find. So of course we don't know yet. It's like when the FBI starts an investigation or the police start an investigation. You don't know what you're going to find when you start it. That's what the word investigate kind of means, is that you look into a thing and then you follow the evidence and see where it goes. Now, as for his initial objection, because remember I said there were two main prongs of this. Basically, it wouldn't be fair because the Democrats would be running it. It would be unbalanced. Let's go to Senator Chuck Schumer. Communist Welsh Octane Zero. Hello. Hello to you. Welcome to the stream. Proletariat Parrot, welcome in. Am I talking about 9/11? No, I'm comparing the insurrection attempt from January the 6th directly to the 9/11 commission that was created.
The Republican minority just mounted a partisan filibuster against an independent commission to report on January 6th. Both efforts should have moved forward in a solidly bipartisan way. But out of fear or fealty to Donald Trump, the Republican minority just prevented the American people from getting the full truth about January 6th. The Republican minority just prevented the Senate from even debating the bill. No opportunity for amendments. No opportunity for debate. There was an attempt by the Republican minority to shunt this vote into the dark of night. But because of today's Senate time agreement, it was done in broad daylight. The American people will see how each Republican senator voted. Now, this should have been simple. The commission was bipartisan, independent, straight down the middle. House Democrats accepted every change that House leadership requested. Speaker Pelosi and I supported and still do support the changes Senator Collins proposed. And we told that to other senators. Senate Republicans for months publicly supported the idea of a commission. But now, all of a sudden, the Senate minority and the Senate minority leader waged a partisan filibuster against the bill. This vote has made it official. Donald Trump's big lie has now fully enveloped the Republican Party. Trump's big lie is now the defining principle of what was once the party of Lincoln. House Republicans canned Congresswoman Cheney for the crime of telling the truth that Joe Biden is president. Republican state legislatures, seizing on that big lie, are conducting the greatest assault on voting rights since the beginning of Jim Crow. Republicans in both chambers are trying to rewrite history and claim that January 6th was just a peaceful protest that got a little out of hand. And now this, a partisan blockade of a simple, independent, bipartisan commission. I've heard all the excuses why Republicans are opposing this bill. It's too early. It goes on too long. It's not needed. Almost all of these excuses are meritless and were invented in the past 2 weeks. We all know what's going on here. Senate Republicans chose to defend the big lie because they believe anything that might upset Donald Trump could hurt them politically. We've all lived through the horrors of January 6th. I was no further than 30 feet from those white supremacist hooligans. Do my Republican colleagues remember that day? Do my Republican colleagues remember the savage mob calling for the execution of Mike Pence, the makeshift gallows outside the Capitol? Men with bulletproof vests and zip ties breaking into the Senate gallery and rifling through your desks. Police officers crushed between doorways. Shame on the Republican Party for trying to sweep the horrors of that day under the rug because they're afraid of Donald Trump. Our democracy has long endured because leaders of good faith, even if they disagreed, even at political cost, shared a fidelity to the truth. Not so today. I hope this is not the beginning of an effort by Senate Republicans to prevent this chamber from debating reasonable, common sense legislation. We will soon see. After the state work period, I will bring forward legislation that would help provide equal pay for women. Will our Republican colleagues?
So no, Senator Schumer, this is not the beginning. Republicans have already threatened to filibuster countless things so far this session. They've done it before in the past. Senator Mitch McConnell, Republican minority leader, his stated intention during Barack Obama's first term was to make sure that Barack Obama was a one-term president. And since then, when the Republican Party does not have control, their stated intention is to block anything Democrats put on paper, anything Democrats want to accomplish. It doesn't matter whether the majority of Americans think that we should look at a thing or not. It doesn't matter whether the majority of Americans think that we should pass a bill or not. The Republican Party's goal, when out of power, is to obstruct, to deny any potential victory to their opposition. Period. Senator Mitch McConnell has literally blocked his own bill when Democrats agreed to it and President Obama was going to get to sign it into law. He filibustered his own bill. I'm not making this shit up. This is their stated goal. Now, the key to all of that was at the beginning. If Senator Mitch McConnell was worried that this was going to just be a Democratic witch hunt, the Democrats have agreed to every compromise that the Republicans have offered on this investigation, on this committee. Senator Collins is a Republican senator. What we will not agree to is to not have an investigation. I'm sorry if this is inconvenient for you politically. It was inconvenient for us as a country to have to stay up all night because the counting of the ballots and the validation of the election was delayed by Trump supporters storming the Capitol. But we still did the job. Now we're going to move into what I believe the motivation is. And I can't prove this deductively, but I think as an inductive argument, it makes sense. It is very plain that there is still a large portion of the Republican Party that supports President Donald Trump. And quite obviously, those tend to be your most vocal and most active party members in the political sphere. When it comes to a primary election, an election for who gets to run for office against the Democrat, most people, most American citizens, do not vote in primary elections. Only your most active, your most partisan party members tend to vote. The fringes on either side, whether it's your more motivated Republicans, your Trump supporters, your QAnon believers, or whether it's your more motivated Democrats, your social justice warrior types, to steal a phrase from my conservative friends. Trump has a very, 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 very motivated core base of support. Anybody who's running for office as a Republican has to first win their primary to run against the Democrat. That's just a reality. It's a stated fact. If you don't win your primary, you don't get to run. Or you can run third party, but you won't be running as a Republican. Same is true of Democrats. The reason that various Republican senators don't want to come out and disown Donald Trump isn't necessarily because they believe him or even agree with him, though admittedly there are some that do. But your average conservative, your fiscal conservative, your old school Republican, they want to stay in office. And to do that, the first step they have to do is win their primary election. And if the majority of people that are going to vote in that are rabid Trump supporters, well, if you can't even win that primary election, you sure as hell don't stand a chance of running against the Democrat, because you won't even be a Republican at that point if you decide to fund your own election. Somebody else will have won that primary. The Republican leadership, the Mitch McConnells and the Kevin McCarthys of the world, their goal is to get more Republicans in office. So instead of being the minority party in the House and the Senate, they can be the majority party and have more power and more control. And you can't do that if Trump's base quits voting or starts voting against you, or splits your vote. If half of them vote for somebody else than your preferred candidate for Senate, then the Democrat's going to win. So at an individual level, as a Republican senator or congressman, the reality of you sacrificing your office by speaking out against President Trump is a very real threat. Do I personally think anybody in office should put the country over their own personal well-being? Should put the country's well-being over their party's well-being? Yeah, that's kind of the oath you swear when you assume office. Do I think there are plenty of individuals that are unwilling to make that sacrifice? Yes, I do. Barbara Ingro, it shouldn't be so lucrative to stay in office. We need to abolish corporate donations and good old boy politics and nepotism and get back to core values and a life of service to the country, not the party. I agree with getting rid of the corporate donations, the good old boy politics and the nepotism. and the life of service to the country, not the party. The lucrative part, I do think that you should be able to make enough money in office from your salary, not from corporate donations or from promises to be on corporate boards or whatever the case is afterwards, that the average American citizen is benefited by running for office. And the reason I say that is, if you pretend hypothetically for a minute that all federal jobs paid no money, any elected position, it was you just did it out of service from the kindness of your heart. I don't know your financial position, but the majority of people I know couldn't afford to go serve their country for 4 years with zero money coming in the door. Zero. They'd be homeless. If I wanted to run for office someday, I couldn't just take 4 years off and serve my country. There's no way. And again, most of the people I know, and I would bet the vast majority of people watching this show, couldn't do that. So if you make it to where the average salary for a congressman or a president or whoever is not lucrative, then you only end up with the super rich that can afford to run, and the yous and me's of the world. None of us are in office because we can't afford to run. Me personally, I would be fine with paying more to congressmen, senators, presidents, etc., but then banning them for X number of years after their term of service from serving on any corporate boards or positions or something like that. So you're going to be rewarded well for your service to this country, but the company that's trying to buy you can't hire you for another 5, 10, 15 years, whatever number would make sense after your term of service is done. So you don't get a Senator Ted Cruz in there that's always going to vote pro-gun no matter what. And then if it costs him an election and he gets booted out, well, he ends up on the board of the NRA making, $500,000 a year. That's what I want to stop. Isn't that how it is now? I don't think they're banned specifically from positions afterwards. I know there's a lot of in and out and ways around it. They are paid decently now, but there's not the ban after the term of service. Now, this is the other thing to look at in terms of why Republicans are trying to block this investigation. We can go back to the first Bush. His approval rating when he was leaving office was in the 40 percentiles. After Clinton, who ended in the 50s and 60s in terms of presidential job approval rating, we get the second Bush, who ends in the 20s and 30s. Then we get Obama in office, ends in the 50s presidential job approval rating. Then we get Trump, ends in the 30s and 40s. 40s to be generous. 34%. Republican leadership is counting on Americans having a very short-term memory. Let's just pretend that the insurrection didn't happen, wasn't as big of a deal as everybody's pretending it was. We don't need a continuing investigation into this. Let's just sweep it under the rug. Because Republican presidents historically leave office for the last 20 plus years. Got to go back to Reagan, right? We historically leave office with absolutely shitty approval ratings anyway, because apparently when the American people get a Republican president, they don't like the policies that end up getting put in place. But come 8 years later, they forget about it, and they'll give a Republican president another shot. So let's just sweep all this insurrection shit under the rug, so it's not constantly reminding the American people of how bad it was this time. So in 4 or 8 years, they'll have forgotten, and we can get another Republican president in office. That's why they don't want to look at this. Out of sight, out of mind. That's the ultimate goal here. We're not interested in accountability because that would keep people talking about it. And Americans tend to have a short-term memory about a lot of these things, about politics in general. Otherwise, based off the approval ratings there, you think we'd put 2 and 2 together, that at the end of Republican terms in office, we generally think the president's doing a pretty shitty job. And at the end of Democratic terms in office, we generally think that the president's doing a pretty good job. But if I can count on you to forget that in 4 to 8 years, well, then I sure as shit don't want to keep talking about the end of my guy's term. I don't want to keep reminding you just how bad it got and how bad it was. I don't want you to remember that the Capitol building was stormed. I don't want you to remember that 500,000 Americans and counting died from COVID. I don't want you to remember that the economy was, kind of headed down. I don't want you to remember all the lies about elections and votes and ballots. I just want you to think, it's time for a change from the Democratic guy. How bad can it be? Can't President Biden just sign an executive order to create a January 6th commission? I hate to play that game, but here we are. I tend to agree with you. Yes, he can, is my understanding, and I think that's where we're headed. Barbara, I also think that President Biden is throwing a lot of popular legislation out right now, having Democrats push it in the House and the Senate. And then when it gets blocked by Republicans, that's the beginning of we need to reform the filibuster conversation. And I think that's a lot of what's going on right here. Banana Raptor God. That is an interesting name. I think a bigger issue, welcome to the stream, by the way. I don't think I've seen you before. I think a bigger issue is when Republicans compare separate things. For example, a fair number of Republicans don't think the 2020 election was properly investigated if elected Republicans can spin that the election investigation was blocked, even if untrue. Well, they can get their voters on board that blocking this investigation is justified. I tend to agree with you. Republicans are Republican leadership. And so let's draw a distinction here when we're talking about the Republican Party versus an individual Republican. I think they are very good at playing, what about this? What about that? Don't look over here because I can't defend this. You need to look at this thing over here because I can talk about this. And we saw that, and I'll play the video again here in a minute when we go on the break. We saw that with the Republican senators and congressmen right now who are trying to say that the insurrection wasn't an insurrection. It was just some disorderly conduct and they were acting like tourists. And that's the first part of the sentence. The second part of the sentence is, but what about the federal Capitol building or the federal courthouse in Seattle, or in, what about the BLM riots, or what about, I can look at two separate things at the same time. If you think that BLM is burning down the country, I don't. I know that it was 97, 99% peaceful protest. I know that we had 26 million Americans protest in 40% of the counties across the United States. And there'd be a lot more than a few buildings on fire if it was not overly peaceful, right? But if I really believed that BLM was burning down the United States of America, to me, okay, that's a problem I need to fix. But I also need to fix this problem of people storming the Capitol building. Republicans, again, the leadership doesn't want to really fix either one. They just don't want you talking about the insurrection attempt. They want you worried about BLM and Antifa instead. The other way we know this is true is because, like Congressman Matt Gaetz on the Senate floor saying that the people that stormed the Capitol weren't Trump supporters, they were Antifa. If you really believe that, an investigation would prove it. And that's how I know that you know that you're full of shit, Congressman Gaetz. You are a disgrace to your office. But yes, I agree with you, Banana Raptor God, overall. I think that very much it's the other side did something similar, so I'm justified in doing this. Whether or not the comparison is equal at all is a different conversation, but I do think a lot of Republicans justify things to themselves that way. The other side did it first, so it's okay. On that note, we're going to take about a 5-minute break. Then we're going to come back. We're going to dive into how this was organized online and why I think specifically we need a lot more, or we need a bipartisan investigation into this, just like we did 9/11, because there's a lot of information here that we need subpoena power to get to, and we need federal authority to demand from a lot of these internet service providers and websites, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. Thank you for the follow. The time for silence is over. So we're going to take about a 5-minute break. After that 5-minute break, we're going to run the initial trailer that I've already played that covers the Republican response to why this isn't that big of a deal, and showing the footage from the insurrection that directly opposes exactly what they're saying. So stick around and we'll be back right afterwards. Thank you. Welcome back, everybody, and thank you for sticking with me through the break. As promised,
this hearing is called the Capitol Insurrection. Let's be honest with the American people. It was not an insurrection, and we cannot call it that and be truthful. The House floor was never breached. And it was not an insurrection.
While we're here, we might as well set up a government. Hey, let's take a seat, people!
But let me be clear. There was no insurrection, and to call it an insurrection, in my opinion, is a bold-faced lie.
At 2:07, a mob of Trump supporters breached the steps. I don't know who did a poll that is Trump supporters.
There's a fucking million of us out there, and we are listening to Trump. You're the boss. It's sad. It's sad.
I've repeatedly asked for the Capitol footage from before and during January 6th. Such footage would provide answers, could contain exculpatory evidence regarding the outrageous accusations against members of Congress, and most importantly, exonerate the many Americans who peacefully protested and never set foot in the Capitol.
Democrats have said the events of the Capitol on January 6th were an assault on our democracy.
Where the fuck are they? Where are they?
And if that's true, if disorderly conduct in a restricted building is an assault on democracy.
While we're here, we might as well set up a government. Hey, let's take a seat, people! Let's take a seat! Nancy Pelosi. Let's vote on some shit! Where the fuck is Nancy?
Then what do we call setting fire to a federal court in Portland, Oregon, where people inside, what do we call that?
Well, guess what? America showed up!
19 people died during BLM riots last year. Hundreds and hundreds were injured. 2,000 police officers were injured from BLM riots last year. And yet, we're going to discuss today, as if none of that happened, the events of January the 6th. The hypocrisy of this body is indeed disturbing.
Treason! 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 Treason!
I agree. Your hypocrisy is astonishing. Communist Welsh Octane. Are those Trump supporters? I don't know, man. I'm not sure. I mean, how could you be certain? I know a lot of non-Trump supporters and people that oppose President Trump that show up to his rallies when he asks them to show up, that storm the buildings or march down to the buildings that he tells them to march down to. I know a lot of not Trump supporters that try and overturn the election results that say that he lost. I know a lot of Trump supporters that, or I know a lot of non-Trump supporters that believe President Trump's big lie about election fraud existing and wanted to stop the steal. I know a lot of non-Trump supporters that apparently spend hundreds of dollars on Trump merchandise and flags. I know a lot of peaceful tourists that break into buildings, knock down doors and knock out glass and push their way past police barricades and start walking around the halls of governmental buildings asking, where the fuck is the opposition? In this case, Nancy Pelosi, but we have several examples of different people they were looking for. Yeah, I think it would be pretty obvious to anybody with eyes and ears and an objective frame of mind. Trump, in your opinion, is kind of mean. I really don't give a shit whether he's mean or nice, personally. And the guy could be a dick. Pardon the language for those of y'all who don't like it. I mean, he could be an ass. But these kinds of results are what I have issue with. Now, to dive into the question of why we need a bipartisan investigation into this. The short version is we need to know exactly how organized this was or was not. You're not American, but there are some things that make no sense. I completely agree with you. This is people trying to deflect the conversation from something they can't defend. As Banana Raptor God pointed out earlier, it is very common for them to go, these two things are equal. And you saw that in that video constantly. The insurrection wasn't that bad. What about BLM? The insurrection wasn't that bad. What about the attack on the federal courthouse? The insurrection wasn't that bad. What about the violence against police? Right? It's just an attempt to divert the conversation to something about, or to about something else. And it's a very common conservative talking point. They're not the only ones that do it, but they seem to have made an art form about it, right? I can't win this argument, so let's have the next argument. I'm going to assume you agree with me about this because I really want to talk about some other thing because I can't defend this. So I can't defend the insurrection, so I'm just going to say my point, even though it's demonstrably false. And then I'm going to, what about something else, so I can get the conversation over here to something that's easier to defend. And that's what we're doing here. They don't want to deal with the insurrection attempt. And that's why they're removing people within their own party who aren't supporting this lie. Like Liz Cheney, which we did an episode on. Is that smackaroo or snakeroo? LOL insurrection? I don't think it's very funny to have an attack on a constitutionally mandated process to confirm an election. But maybe you do. Was it an insurrection? I consider it as such. I think the evidence supports that conclusion. If you have a problem with the phrase insurrection, I would be happy to talk to use the phrase Trump supporters who took over the federal Capitol building to stop the confirmation of a constitutionally mandated federal election for president. They took it over. The federal government did not have control of the building, so yes, they took it over. Did they make demands? They rifled through people's desks and specifically wanted to stop the confirmation of that election. So yes. Okay, I'm happy that they vandalized. That doesn't preclude any of the other things I have said. If I go into your house and I shoot you in the head and I also take your TV, I stole something. That doesn't change the fact that I also shot you in the head in Minecraft. No, I didn't say vandalized equals insurrection. This is you trying to change the topic to something you can defend. It's ironic that we were quite literally just talking about that, and then you're going to come in and try and do the same thing. They pushed their way past police barricades, broke down doors, and stop the confirmation, a bit temporarily, of a federally mandated, constitutionally mandated process. Who was the leader of the insurrection? From, I'm going to call you Smackaroo because I can't quite see it on my screen. That's why we need a bipartisan investigation. I think there were multiple leaders involved in this. I think President Trump bears some culpability. I think Enrico Tarrio of the Proud Boys did a lot of organizing. I think we know that some members of the Oath Keepers were doing some planning. But yeah, if there's nothing to see here, let's investigate it. From Communist Wealth Octane again. Yes, BLM has grown bigger because of Trump. Police officers have helped rioters in the Capitol building siege, but yet Trump kind of gave it the strength to grow bigger. Then he doesn't know why it's grown. I'm not sure I follow your point. But yes, if you're talking about Trump trying to crack down on BLM protests and adding to the violence, then I tend to agree with you. It added more fuel to the fire, not the opposite way around. Smackaroo. So there was a big secret plan to stop the confirmation, and what happened on January the 6th was it? Well, I think the word secret is kind of disingenuous, considering the Stop the Steal campaign was everywhere on social media. Considering Trump himself was out there saying that he would not peacefully transition power. Considering Trump himself in a debate told the Proud Boys to stand back and stand by. Considering Trump himself set the date for January the 6th for his rally, his Stop the Steal rally. Considering Trump's personal attorney stood on stage and said, let's have trial by combat to that crowd. And then Trump follows him on stage and tells his supporters to march down to the Capitol and that he'll be right there with them. Yeah, I don't know about that whole secret part. But again, if the word insurrection is a problem for you, we can say Trump had all of his supporters show up and march down to the Capitol, told them to march down to the Capitol to stop the steal, to stop the confirmation of the election. Talk about burning things down if things don't go their way. I'm not sure what you're referring to. Trump is evil. Trump is one of the worst presidents ever. I'm surprised nobody has tried to assassinate him, the evil guy. So careful, communists, because I don't advocate for political violence on this stream. I know you didn't say that directly, but you're dancing on the line. I don't think Trump was a very good president, not remotely. I think evil is a strong word. I think he's a raging narcissist and power hungry as hell. I also think he leans extremely authoritarian, which is a problem in a constitutional democracy or constitutional republic. But for the assassination bit, stay away from that word in here. Personally, I would advocate hugely against that because you're going to turn him into a martyr. Oh my God, a march, a political protest in America in 2020 from Snakearoo. I've never heard of that before January the 6th. I don't have a problem with the march. I don't have a problem with the protest. I do have a problem with people breaking down the doors to the United States Capitol building to stop a constitutionally mandated process as required by the Constitution to validate federal elections in the United States of America that are also constitutionally mandated. I'm not saying that the Republican Party never gets to hold a rally again. I'm not saying go arrest all the people that were peacefully at the January the 6th protest, and when Trump told them to march down to the Capitol went, maybe that isn't such a brilliant fucking idea. That's not what I'm saying. That might be what you're hearing, but that's not remotely what I've said. But the idiots who broke into the Capitol in service of this great lie, the idiots who incited them, who lied to them and gave them false information and told them to march down there and stop the constitutionally mandated process, yeah, they get to be held accountable for their actions. That's the wonderful thing about living in this country. They were let in after they had pushed past the police barricades. So when they occupied the Capitol protests against the Supreme Court nominee, they were insurrectionists. Did they stop the process, or did they peacefully protest? Did they start running around the Capitol going, where's Vice President Mike Pence? Where's Republican Senate Majority Leader Mitch McConnell? Hey, we're already here. We should just set up a government. Did they march in chanting treason? Come on, my dude. This is not the hill you want to die on. They talk about killing Trump on the daily, as you've seen in your chat. Did they break down the doors to the United States Capitol building, firing chemical agents at police officers, get inside the building in body armor and zip ties, and then start trying to hunt down their political opposition? Did those things happen? Or are you going to point to Kathy Griffin, a hack comedian who made a stupid thing that I'm not comfortable with either? And the bigger difference between you and me is when I had one chatter say something advocating for political violence, I told him he needed to cut it out. And you're over here trying to justify taking over the federal Capitol building during a constitutionally mandated process. That's the difference. They didn't take it over. Really? So Congress didn't stop doing what they were doing? They didn't barricade the doors? We didn't have to deploy the National Guard to take it back? Congress just went on about their business completely uninterrupted while these guys walked through and stole the fucking podium and tried to hunt people down? I don't know what world you're living in, man, but the facts sure as hell don't support it. They could have. Oh, so they could have continued their business while people were trying to find specific individuals and stole the podium. I mean, I guess you could continue. I could continue the show if you stole my desk. I mean, I guess you're right about that. I don't know if you broke down the door to my studio wearing body armor and zip ties, and that if I had personal security or Secret Service detail, they told me, sir, we need to get the hell out of here, that I would sit at my desk long enough for you to steal it. Certainly not if you marched in with hundreds of people chanting treason. But yeah, that's a nice fantasy world you live in there, my man. I'm going to run away from you and call you a murderer, and it's true because I'm running. I didn't call anybody a murderer. Quit projecting. Oh, you're calling me a murderer. Well, that's nice. Have I broken into your house or place of business? Have I stolen your desk to stop you from doing or working on whatever you're working on? Am I wearing body armor currently that I'm unaware of? Are you currently engaged in a constitutionally mandated process in service of the United States government? I mean, you can call me a murderer all you want. But I'm not doing any of the things that the people on your side did. Therefore, insurrection. Okay. Again, we just went through it. I'm not breaking down the door to your house. I'm not stopping you from doing a constitutionally mandated process in service of the United States government. I'm not wearing body armor. I'm not trying to hunt you down. I'm not breaking down your door screaming out, "Where's fucking Snackaroo?" Like they were doing when they broke down the doors to the United States Capitol building. I'm not firing chemical agents into your house at the people outside defending your house either, now that I think about it. I mean, you can keep trying to go down this analogy, my dude, but it's not going to work out too well for you. Yeah, Barbara, you're right. Let's jump to online evidence. Okay, that's enough with the troll. We'll see if he commits anything else good, substantive to the conversation. Okay, so what this comes from, for those of you who are unaware, there was a forum, an online forum, on a website called Reddit. One of the top 10 most traveled websites, most unique users in the world, if I'm not mistaken, certainly in the United States of America. On that website, you can have different groups where people can discuss whatever they want to discuss. Whether it's recipes for fried chicken, or their support for Republicans, or their support specifically for Donald Trump, or fast cars, or whatever. You can make as many different groups as you want, and you can join as many different groups as you want, and you can communicate with people that are like-minded like you. One of the largest areas of Trump supporters online was a group on Reddit called The Donald. It had issues following Reddit's terms of service. It didn't play by the rules. Pushing election fraud stuff, pushing advocating for violence, etc., etc., etc. So Reddit blocked that group, and a lot of those members moved over to a website that their moderators set up, a separate website. These are going to be clips, screen caps, from thedonald.win, website set up by those same online supporters. The names are anonymous. The upvote means good, I agree with this. Downvote means I disagree with this, are bad. You can't prove who any of these individual users are without subpoena power, which is, again, why we need to investigate into this. But you can tell what that group of people was thinking at any given point in time by what was most popular on that website, whether it moved up or down. Just like if you look at Facebook, you can see something that has 10,000 likes versus something that has, 20 likes and see what the difference is, right? Kind of see how things are trending. So initially on November the 4th, you see a lot of, 5,000, 4,600, 6,100 upvoted states. Pennsylvania panics and stops counting ballots. Nothing to see here. South Dakota is MAGA country. This is as the election was going on, right, on November the 4th. So as Trump wins certain states, you see a lot of upvotes, a lot of popularity on, hey, Trump won Ohio, or Ohio's in question. Trump won Texas, right? Which is to be expected if you're on a political news site, right? Hey, my guy won. Go my guy. Nothing wrong with that. Excitement everywhere. We got it. No Democrat has ever won the White House without winning Florida. Okay? They started to get angry at the media for not calling the election for Trump and that they should load up on magazines for firearms just in case. The greatest part of their anger was directed at Fox News, who called Arizona for Biden prematurely in the eyes of the Donald. That's what TD stands for. I believe it. Say a prayer and load a mag before you go to sleep. Before you go to sleep, load up on some mags. Already making sure my guns are ready. There's a huge amount of voter fraud in the Somali community. It's on video and everything, but of course nothing happened. So this is where it's starting. I hate that I have to go to bed without being 100% sure. I looked at Bannon, I looked at Crowder. That's Steven Crowder, the YouTube guy. Huge conservative media presence online. They seem pretty confident. Assuming there's no shenanigans like the 2000 Florida recount to drag this shit out indefinitely. I'm being positive. Riddle me this. They call Arizona with Biden up 5 with 80% in, but won't call Wisconsin where Trump is up 3.6% with 93% in. Media is a disgrace. I think they're going to do shit with outstanding mail-ins in those places. I'm pretty sure votes are due in those states tonight, but they're allowed to be counted later. Is that right? Yes, they are. And that kind of answers the question of why you're not going to call some states, but you will call others. We knew mail-in ballots beforehand were going to lean heavily towards Joe Biden. Hell, President Trump even told his supporters not to vote by mail. That alone would have an impact. But polling beforehand showed that Democrats were, I think it was 65 to 35% more likely to vote by mail than Republicans. This was not amazing. The Donald wanted him, Trump, to declare victory so that it could become a hot war. Victory is already his, Donald Trump's. Everybody knows Biden cannot get to 270 after losing Pennsylvania and Florida. Now they are trying to play their backup card, which is tens of millions of fraudulent ballots. No proof of this, just a claim. You've got some reason down here at the bottom. You obviously aren't paying attention with Biden flipping Arizona. All he needs is 2 out of 3 blue wall states to flip back blue. You're delirious. Now notice your difference here. Okay? 118 positive. 2 positive. Calls for civil war had begun after Trump's tweet saying he would be making a big announcement. What's going on? Civil war. Just got my AR, let's go. Recently brought another one, you just need to oil it. Who's got the truck? Who's getting everybody together? Hope you had time to zero it. At least wait till they stop counting the votes. LOL. Trump finishes this. State of the election. 138,000 votes, not a single one for Trump. I kind of want to sleep, but I'm not missing a minute of this. Again, Trump won. The fraud is so obvious, there's no way the Dems will be able to defend themselves in court. Sooner or later, GEOTUS, which is short for God Emperor of the United States, will be declared the winner, referring to President Trump. We are up big, but they are trying to steal the election. The next day, the endgame for the election had begun. The word fraud was on everybody's lips. So this is how we're explaining why it's looking like we're going to lose. Fraud, endgame, more documented fraud, numerous photos from Michigan voter database shows numerous voters with a birth year of 1/1/1900. I've looked at the one in Pennsylvania. Somebody sent me on that. Pennsylvania's website specifically discloses the fact that the people with that date of birth have been victims of domestic violence. So they alter their birth date. They're a real person. They just hide their birth date. So, you know, the person that beat the hell out of them can't find them again. November 7th, Biden declared victory over his opponent. We start getting the meltdown. Joe Biden should not wrongfully claim the office of president. Election fraud evidence. Election software system in Michigan that switched 6,000 votes from Trump to Biden is called Dominion, so we've started with the Dominion lie. It is used in 30 states, including all the battleground states. Apparently, they couldn't figure out how to make it work in the other 25 states, but only in these 5. Y'all remember this? There's a laptop with encrypted USB drive stolen from Philadelphia election machine warehouse that somehow never made it to court or got shot down in court by Trump-appointed justices. So this is how we're dealing with the we lost, Joe Biden declared victory bit. November 8th through 30th. The courts are failing us. Do we have other options? We're going to look only at Trump's total number of legal votes. We're not going to consider Joe Biden's or the fact that he had more. I could have $1 billion. If you have $1,000,001, you still win on who has the bigger bank account. It doesn't matter how much I have if you've got one more. This isn't hard to comprehend, but apparently it is for some people. It attempted to alter our election and got caught. Subtle, Joe, real subtle, talking about hope and change, parentheses, votes. Now 73 million legal votes, so apparently the ones for Joe Biden were all illegal. Fox News didn't just betray you, they set you up. Denial, denial, denial. Jim Jordan and Representative James Comer call for immediate congressional investigation into the 2020 election. In case you didn't think that these Republican congressional leaders didn't play into this shit, didn't help create this cycle and feed into it, their vocal support and their actions on this stuff certainly encourage these guys. The mods actually realized on the 20th they might be forced offline because of the increasing extremism of their content and discussed making a backup. Let me start by telling you guys not to freak out. We have no reason to believe any of the following is necessary. But we have a lot of experience with internet censorship and we like to stay a step ahead of our enemies, hence this site existing in the first place. Keep all of these following web pages bookmarked so you can keep track with us. So again, just in case this website blocks us, like what happened to Parler, like what happened to Donald Trump on Twitter, here's the backup so you can catch up to us. It was at this point that they had reached the top 500 most visited websites in the United States. God is with us. No weapon formed against us shall prosper. We wear the armor of God. He teaches our hands to war and our fingers to fight. The people who survive the sword will find favor in the desert. If God is for us, who could ever stop us? He trains my hands in war and my fingers to fight again. Fuck all commies. I'll bring the helicopters. Communists aren't people. We should have had the Donald.1. What is the Kraken? Same question. Are we really the Kraken? That was the Sidney Powell. I'm going to release this lawsuit that's going to prove Donald Trump's actually won the election. For those of y'all who are unaware, Sidney Powell's current legal defense, since Dominion is suing the piss out of her, is that no reasonable person would possibly have believed the claims that she made. So if you bought into this, even Sidney Powell, the attorney who released the Kraken, doesn't think you're reasonable. Finally, the lawsuit started to come in around the end of the month, and the Donald became increasingly excited about it. The Supreme Court would overturn the fraud even if others did not. Supreme Court of the United States is going to be busy. Time to earn your keep, fellas. When that didn't work, these motherfucking politicians are way too comfortable being traitors. Honestly, a complete and total coup via fraud, throwing out the Constitution and flat out saying, fuck you to the American voice. This needs to change now. They don't fear us and have never had the rule of law enforced on them. There have been zero consequences for any Dem for decades. AR-15 goes cha-chink. I'm ready to fucking go to war. We need a general call to it. Hundreds of thousands, if not millions of us are. Judges should hang. Nail them to wooden crosses. This man, talking about President Trump, only has to say a single word and I will be there. Don't mistake my patience for complacency. That's how I feel. 1% of Trump's voters is another to fuck shit up. I'm sure he meant enough. He said be there on Saturday. Probably a good idea to prove he still has a large crowd supporting him by making that a huge rally. Big rallies are important. Constant rallies near state legislatures, courthouses, governorships, etc. My permit is the First Amendment. My Second Amendment is my confirmation code, SKS. That's a form of rifle for those of you who are unfamiliar. December 1st through the 18th, radicalization continues. And I apologize right now for anybody dropping in the chat. I can't read it when I'm looking at the web pages. So I will catch up as soon as we're done with this. Shame was bottomless. They even asked for unity after stealing the election. After what they have put us through for the past 4 years, I will die before I unite with these entitled F-slur. Fuck them. They have called us every name under the sun, from deplorables to racists to Nazis, and they want unity. Sorry, I am all out of unity. All I have left is war. It's kind of hilarious that the guy complaining about being called a deplorable and a Nazi is now advocating for war. He had me at war. Trump could have many deputized posses in every state arrest Democrat and rhino traitors. Now it's time to unite them with some high-speed lead and copper bullets. All I wanted was to be left alone. Now all I want to see is death to commies. War was on the tongue of every member and calling for death. was now the default mode of operations after their defeat in court. I think every member is probably a little over generous. But if you looked at the upvote count on a lot of those things, you were looking at 500, 600, 700 upvotes on comments in these threads. Again, on the 500th most visited website in the country during this time. So we're not talking about a little bitty small podunk middle of nowhere website. Rubicon Dawn was posted on December the 5th and immediately stuck at the top by the people in charge of the website. Obviously a reference to Caesar back in Rome crossing the Rubicon River, which is the point where the point of no return for overthrowing the Roman Republic. There's no turning back, gentlemen. Only way home is on your shield. Your home is America. They are trying to take it down a dark path. Raise your shield. In before the cucks arrive to whine about how bad or about how dictatorships are bad. I'll take a Trump autocracy over a globalist one-party state any day. These people just voted. They lost. Fuck democracy. It's now a one-party state somehow. The talk of bringing weapons to the next protest attack was everywhere. Fuck yeah, it's happening. Love it. Build the momentum. Start showing up with guns at some point. Patriots with guns are all they fear. This is true. They absolutely fear the gun. Think about how these people view guns. Dangerous. How do they view patriots? Dangerous. Put the two together and it is their worst nightmare. I own a gun. I'm former military. I'm not scared of guns. I'm scared of idiots with guns, but I know how to handle those too. Just say the word, Mr. President. Martial law. Let the radical left escalate. We'll end it. Standing back, standing by, standing proud and standing by. In case you think his statement didn't matter. He's the commander-in-chief. If he calls on the militia, the people, we will follow. He's been fighting by himself against the Goliath deep state/China unholy alliance for 4 years. We can drive the commies out. I don't think whoever that was has any idea what a commie actually is. Because I don't see any in the United States government. I don't think that guy has any concept of what a loan actually means, considering Trump brought in his entire staff with him. Not my fault Trump kept firing them or hiring idiots who'd quit or hiring idiots that couldn't get confirmed. But hell, Steve Bannon he brought in a lot of people that hadn't been members of the Republican establishment. But somehow that means a loan. Cross the Rubicon, Mr. President. From the 7th to the 19th, the comments and posts mostly consisted of, we need to do an armed revolution, Rubicon Dawn, praise for the Proud Boys' actions throughout the time period as they marched in D.C. 2 more times. One interesting development during this time period is that people started to focus on January the 6th as the last day to decertify the election and keep Trump for president. Senator Mitch McConnell is telling senators not to object to the electors on January the 6th. Tell him to, quote, shut the fuck up. From December the 19th, rhetoric starts reaching a fever pitch. Kemp, the Georgia Secretary of State, was a special target of hatred because he wouldn't say that the election in Georgia was invalid, even though they did 3 audits and none of it showed any form of massive multi-statewide election fraud conspiracy to overturn the Georgia results. From Donald Trump's Twitter, big protest in D.C. on January the 6th. Be there. Will be wild. They had marching orders that they had been waiting for. Well, shit. We've got marching order, boys. 3,037 times upvoted. Let's make this march biblical, patriots. 1,600 times upvoted. We need to be hyping this up as much as possible from now until January the 6th. I'm going to grab my plane ticket. This needs to be an absolute monster. The next comment's going to require a little bit of explanation. Minecraft doesn't allow pickaxes on flying machines. So it's a well-known internet trope, idea, comment, that if you say something that crosses the bounds of terms of service that would get you in trouble or banned, you just add the words "in Minecraft" at the end of it so you can say you're talking about the video game Minecraft. I'm going to kill somebody in Minecraft, right? Makes it okay. So the comment directly above this one that this comment was replying to said he's going to grab a plane ticket. And the guy replying to him said, they don't allow weapons, pickaxes, on flying machines, aircraft. In other words, don't get a plane ticket because you can't bring a weapon. That's a marching order if I ever heard one. First one of the year. I thought you can't carry in D.C. I thought you couldn't commit election fraud too, but here we are. Notice I thought you can't carry in D.C. has a negative overall opinion. And the election fraud bit has a positive overall opinion by a lot. The commander-in-chief has issued his orders January the 6th, Washington, D.C. It's now or never. Wisconsin here, if anybody needs to plan a carpool. Here in South Florida can seat 5 or 6 plus catapult or equivalent weight. I can support 5 or 6 plus the equivalent of a catapult and weapons. Should we all drive and bring the guns in Minecraft or on the DC server? Yes. Aluminum block of mass destruction. Educational purposes only. Select fire for a stamped AK. Russian assault rifle. All the people bringing firearms should all coordinate. If we are scattered, it would be too easy to arrest us. At that point, the debate moved in large part off the Donald into private servers for Discord, an online communication program, and Telegram, again, an online encrypted communication platform, where they coordinated in secret, but the goals stayed public. Everyone spread the message. Tell the boomers who don't use the internet, tell the boomers who do use the internet, tell your friends, tell your families, etc. Don't make Discord servers to plan meetups. Use messaging chains. Do Signal, identify, or ideally, and use anonymous straw poll for decision making. We're not planning anything illegal, Discord or any other platform where we can get together for now. Just a general comment, never carry a gun without ammo. Also, never carry a fake toy or weak gun with the intent of appearing armed. Obviously, weak is relative to the threat. If you choose to engage in civil disobedience, do it with your eyes open and your hand filled. And if arrested, accept your arrest peacefully. I agree with all but the submitting peacefully. Do not submit to unlawful detainment. We are at war. December the 20th through January the 5th. Trump tweet, Daddy says be in D.C. on January the 6th. Prepared for the 6th yet? January the 6th by boat, by plane, by train, by automobile. January the 6th for the foreign Trump supporters out there. You also go to your national capital and you also show support for the West and liberty and anti-corruption. Let's make this global. I am so fucking pumped. Just brought 2 plane tickets and a hotel room. My brother and me will be there. Support from California. Let's go save America. 6,500 votes up. 13,849 votes up. By January the 20th, the post had reached 14,000 upvotes with tens of thousands of people seeing it. There were 3,300 all about how exactly to commit violence and the best way to go about it. There were other posts that the moderators of this particular website had stuck to the top, with Washington crossing the Delaware and Trump crossing the Rubicon. On the 6th, Rubicon Dawn would emerge and there would be a counter coup, because remember, they thought this election was fraudulent, even though that's bullshit. A lot of the comments from the 20th are unfortunately unarchived, or at least I cannot access them, but going from memory, it's more of the same. So I'll discard the going from memory part. "90% of the Donald. Me in 2016. Me in 2020 hanging people and chopping people's heads off. Upvoted 7,531 times. Excuse me, 7,532. One person voted it down. The bloodlust is real. The only way to satiate it is to make the executions public and brutal. Lethal injection will not do it. Traitors gotta hang or possibly firing squad. I was thinking earlier today, suppose 500,000 people showed up on 1/6, and suppose just 1% of them were willing to start shooting. That's 5,000 people. That's more than enough to overwhelm whatever police they have there and take over the Capitol building. I want to kill all communists in my country and help my beloved Trump and save the Americans. And of course, when they got there, I think we've all seen that photo and the guy setting it up on January the 1st. Again, notice this Trump tweet, the rally on the 6th will be wild when he set the date. We're now up to 23,000. We must get to D.C. We must get ready for the fireworks and get ready for the fight against the swamp on the 6th. By now, Trump's tweet had been stickied for 14 days, had 22,000 upvotes. What if Congress ignores the evidence? What if they don't vote the way we want to not certify the election? It's going to be wild. Storm the Capitol. You're fucking right, we do. My truck is lifted and I have a plow on it right now. What do you need, Mr. President? Don't rally, don't protest, fight for your fucking lives. Honestly worried about Trump's plans for this rally protest thing. He should just let us go nuts. I don't know about you, but we've got about 50 men going, and we're not going with picket signs. Proud Boys won't arm up. It's not what they do. They wear body armors and ballistic helmets. I don't see why they wouldn't bring self-defense items. January the 6th, 3:38 in the morning. Patriots taking over the night in D.C. Trump says be in D.C. on January the 6th. Statement from President Donald J. Trump. Mike Pence and I are in total agreement. Well, if you are in total agreement with President Donald Trump, that would imply, at least to me, that Vice President Mike Pence agrees that the election was fraudulent, because obviously that's what Trump had been putting out that he believed. I will be speaking at the Save America rally tomorrow at 11 a.m. Eastern. Arrive early. Big crowds. The New York Times report regarding comments Vice President Pence supposedly made to me today is fake news. He never said that. The Vice President and I are in total agreement that the Vice President has the power to act. That he can decertify the results or send them back to the states. Let the games begin. War drums intensify. War drums increases, excuse me. Do the right thing, Pence. You were chosen for such a time. Boom, there it is. That's why I came to D.C. This is our hill to die on. Give them nothing, but take everything. Better not be talk. There's been way too much talk. Be willing to die for your country and make those bastards pay for everything. If they assign the electors to Biden, we all know what to do. And after the 20th, the fight gets infinitely harder. Now or never. Yes, this is the hill we die on. Mr. President, I am awake at the ready, mere blocks away, awaiting your call, sir. Remember, this is all on January the 6th at this point. Get some sleep. You'll need it in the morning. No call will come. Glad someone said it. So there's a little bit of doubt going on here. 129 up. I'm ready. No call will come. 10 up. What day is it today? It's the day we burn this motherfucker to the ground. My favorite day. Nice little meme there for you. The morning of January the 6th had finally arrived. Trump's live stream had started. You can watch January the 6th live here. Trump states want to correct their vote, which we know were based on irregularities and fraud. Bullshit. Plus corrupt processes that never received legislative approval. All Mike has to do is send them back to the states and we will win. Trump rally in D.C. 6 buses full of patriots coming in hot. Let's do this. To whoever had the train horn in D.C. this morning, thanks for the wake-up call. January the 6th is here. Time to melt some deep state faces. Show up so the U.S. doesn't get fucked. That's it for the day. The next day, they already started rewriting the narrative. President Trump did not order violence. If we're being honest, there wasn't a lot of violence in D.C. today, outside of the cops shooting an unarmed woman. That said, the internet is absolutely glowing right now with people that want us gone, and we'd rather not let them achieve that. We can celebrate, condemn, discuss what has happened today, but this isn't the place to be organizing or calling directly for violence of any sort. Places to do that are easy to find. I know this isn't what you want to hear. If I'm being honest, it's not exactly what I would want to say, but we're at a crossroads where we either continue to follow the president's lead as we have always done, or we decide we know best. Something big did happen today. A very small group of people made a very large message. Today was a good reminder to our leaders and to us. It isn't the end, it's a beginning. The mods would continue to follow Trump's instructions after the, all caps, unplanned nonviolent march on the Capitol. Calls to violence, of course, now that it failed, would no longer be tolerated. This caused a stir in the community. I think the mods have been threatened to be shut down. I'm getting this vibe as well. Maybe they got a visit or something of the sort. Yeah, this place went dead silent. I think we might need an alternative to the Donald. The clock starts today. The United States we all loved is over. So now that the moderators are trying to be responsible because the whole thing failed, you see the community isn't necessarily going along with this. This is the problem when you tell crazy people that they're right. They might actually believe you and themselves. Here's a summary of the events and why they didn't want violence, but in my mind it's probably too late either. Antifa wanted in for the photo op. Media is going to run all Trump supporters are evil and need jailed, etc. Leader of the gang busting in was from Antifa protests. There was no Antifa, just patriots willing to fight. Exactly. It's sickening seeing people giving Antifa the glory of fed up Americans the last 2 years. Here's a man that called Pence's betrayal doing research on a few images proving Antifa was there leading the patriots into a friendly. Now, it wasn't us now. It's not like we've been organizing and communicating and, promoting violence at this January the 6th thing for weeks. It was Antifa. They tried their best. They attempted to save democracy and they failed. America is now a communist country and Antifa is responsible for it, and it's finally over. So let me see if I can catch up with chat here real quick. So some of this isn't going to be on the screen. The time for silence is over. Thank you for the follow, Dave, not the rave. So I'm going to scroll up for a second, and I apologize for those of y'all who I couldn't catch to. Vampire Hunter D, welcome. I appreciate you being here. I think it's the first time I've seen you in. Thank you, sir. Biden definitely did not get the most votes in U.S. history. That's comical. She looks 19. Joe Biden got most votes in U.S. history. I don't know who she is that you were referring to. And apparently, he did. We also have more people than we've had in U.S. history. So while he might not have gotten the largest percentage, this isn't that hard to comprehend. Hoser for life, former conservative pulling a Hunter Avalon, are you? Insurrection, or as Chuck Schumer called it, the erection. I think it was a march into the Capitol building in order to stop a constitutionally mandated process based on a lie that former President Trump pushed out and set the date for. Whether you want to call it an insurrection or not, I'm going to, because it tried to stop a constitutionally mandated process and the individuals who were elected to serve the United States government from completing that process. But welcome. I don't think I've seen you in either. I appreciate you being here. That's one reason Trump won in 2016. He was more active and did more events than Hillary did. I think you're partially correct on that in case you were referring to somebody else in chat. I also think Hillary had insanely high negatives just overall. And 2016 was most definitely a outsider election. The United States people, or the United States population, did not seem to want a establishment candidate. That was not the year for her to run. But I was a Bernie supporter, not a Clinton supporter. I ended up voting for her, obviously, as a lesser of two evils because I could see what I was dealing with Trump. But I do agree that running an establishment candidate in 2016 was not the right call to make. Barbara, I had forgotten a lot of that. So had I. There was a lot to go over. Okay, I'm sure you could find equivalent or worse comments from the left against Trump saying horrible stuff or wishing death upon him or evil acts to be committed on. We can play tit for tat all day. Biden is supposed to be the most popular president. Okay, so that's the second point for you. So the problem with that theory is the left didn't end up storming the Capitol. Right? These words, these organizations, this organizational scheme ended up having a demonstrable result. That's the difference. Kathy Griffin, the comedian who is an idiot that gets on TV and does some sketch comedy, in her words, that I don't find funny either, about killing Donald Trump, didn't result in hundreds to thousands of Biden supporters storming the White House to try and chop off Donald Trump's head in Minecraft. Okay? There's a demonstrable difference between these two things. We know that Trump supporters showed up on January the 6th. We know that Donald Trump told them in his speech to march down to the Capitol building and that he would be right there with them, and that you will never take back your democracy with weakness. We know what happened when these Trump supporters got to the Capitol and knocked down doors and broke windows and fired chemical agents at police officers, DC police officers who were trying to attempt to stop them from entering the Capitol. We know the results of this. So to pretend like it's just talk, I agree with you that some of them were probably just talking, but it's not remotely equivalent. From where I'm sitting, this is a huge equivocation fallacy. Biden is supposed to be the most popular president they want us to believe, yet his rally attendance hasn't typically reflected that. His rally attendance during the middle of a global pandemic that Democrats take more seriously than Republicans, whether it's from wearing masks to quarantining to not going to rallies, hasn't reflected that. Shocking. I fixed it for you, though. This is the equivalent of all those leftist shows or YouTube channels where they go to Trump events with the express purpose of finding the most stereotypical and extreme person in the crowd to make them look stupid and or radical. Quite the opposite, hoser. The number down there is toll free, and I take all callers, and you can send me whatever you want. I'll vet it for the next week. If you want to get your research together for next week to go over this week's topic, you are more than welcome to call in, and I will look at your evidence. If you send it to me via Twitter at @left_speaks, or you can go to the webpage, theleftspeaks.com, and email, tweet, link, whatever you need to from there for your sources. I will be happy to vet it for you and set it up so when you need to present it on the phone call, I will display it for the full audience to see. If there is an argument that these were not Trump supporters and that Trump didn't encourage this by setting the date and telling his supporters specifically to march down to the Capitol, you are more than welcome to make it. I will even give you the week to get your evidence together to make that case. Anytime on this show, anytime. The current discussion, current topic, and last week's topic are always open for debate and discussion. And that's so you don't feel like you got sandbagged, because I don't expect you to know what I'm covering next week, because I have to wait to see what's politically relevant next week. The reason we're talking about the insurrection this week is because the Republicans blocked a bipartisan investigation into the insurrection this week. That's why last week's topic is always open for discussion, so you can go do your research too. Because I am never going to put ideology over reality. If you have better arguments and evidence, I am more than willing to hear it. Barbara Ingro, Hoser, you are still trying to rewrite the narrative. This is how it all played out. Scrublord, 1963, it was not much of an insurrection. Well, it was the first time the United States Capitol building has not been under the control of the federal government since the War of 1812 when the British burned it down. So while ultimately their planning was piss poor after they secured the Capitol building, up until that point, they accomplished more than others had accomplished. Dave, not the rave. Sure, America is a communist country. I know, it's hilarious. These people have no idea what communism even actually is, or who advocates for it in that matter. Scrublord, 1963. If it was an insurrection, they would have been armed. They would have burned the place down. It was a riot, not an insurrection. So if somebody put bombs and the Republican National Committee headquarters and the Democratic National Committee headquarters during this storming of the Capitol building, would that cross the armed phase for you? If somebody like, I don't know, say the Proud Boys had been communicating about getting caches of weapons into DC, would that have made it an insurrection for you? Because you can look it up. Those things actually happened. I'm just curious. Or do they specifically have to burn down the building for it to be an insurrection for you? Because that's not the way coups and insurrections normally work. Normally you take the center of power. You don't then just burn it to the ground. Scrublord referring to at Dave, not the rave. We are headed in that direction. You are so far off base, you have no clue what you are talking about. The marginal tax rate on the richest people in this country under Eisenhower was 93%. 93. We are currently in the 20s. We have moved much further in the capitalism, unions bad, any type of socialist policies bad direction as compared to where we were during the Great Depression and the 1950s that you clearly have drank the Kool-Aid. Under FDR, we were talking about a maximum wage in this country, the most a single individual could make. Now we're talking about moving the marginal tax rate back over 25%. That's how far the discussion has moved in capitalism's favor. Now, I'm not a socialist or a communist in the sense that I want to abolish capitalism completely. I can see where it has its benefits and provides motivation, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. I can also see where there are certain industries where capitalism doesn't seem to be the best model to apply because people don't take the time to educate themselves on those things. We don't apply capitalism to our fire departments because when your house is on fire, you're not Googling Yelp reviews to figure out which one's the best fire department to call. Why we expect somebody who's having a heart attack to have their relative who's calling 911 to ask the operator who the most cost-effective ambulance company is to send to them to save their dying father during a heart attack, and then in the ambulance on the way to the hospital figuring out which hospital and cardiac unit is the most cost-effective best decision to make to take them to is beyond me. But no, to sit here and argue that we've become more communist is hilariously ignorant. Dave, not the rave. You don't have free healthcare education. You're so long off even a mild socialist country. I'm like in Ireland. Welcome from Ireland. I appreciate you being here, and you made my point, same as me. Read the Texas lawsuit. It sums up the criticisms of the election nicely. If you want to link that to me, feel free, again, through Twitter or the website, theleftSpeaks.com. It'll provide you all the links to the social media. I'll be happy to look it over. However, lawsuits, by definition, are the claim. I am more interested in the evidence than the claim. Do they have evidence to back that lawsuit up? Or is it going to be like the other 60-plus election fraud lawsuits that got kicked the hell out of court by Trump justices and judges, by Republican appointed judges and justices, and by Democratic appointed judges and justices? Because if it's just more wild ass claims like Sidney Powell had that she's now saying no reasonable person should have believed, then it's not going to get you very far with me. Trump did not tell them to invade the Capitol. They did that all on their own. No, but Trump did tell them to march down to the Capitol and that he would be there with them. Spoiler, he wasn't, because he's a coward. And that you will never take back your democracy with weakness. He also told them that they would have to fight for their democracy and their rights multiple times, and that the election was stolen, and that it was the Save America rally, right? And stop the steal. This isn't that hard to put together. It really isn't. Why do you have the Constitution as your background from Scrublord 1963? The left uses the Constitution as toilet paper. They hate it. Liberals wrote the Constitution. Furthermore, I served in the United States Army as an infantry officer, and I swore an oath to protect and defend that Constitution. So if you wonder why I'm a little bit heated that a president of the United States would tell a crowd full of nuts to go storm the Capitol building to stop a constitutionally mandated process, a constitutionally required election, yeah, maybe that's why. Maybe it's not my side that's using the Constitution as toilet paper. We didn't storm the Capitol building to try and stop a constitutionally mandated process. Big brain time. Hoser for life. Cool. I do appreciate you reading my comments. Absolutely. And I appreciate you being here. Dave, not the rave. The worst insurrection ever. Boring. It wasn't boring, but yeah, it was very terribly planned after the initial storming of the Capitol. Riot, yes. Insurrection, no. From Scrublord, the part you're missing is the part where they rioted in the United States Capitol building and stopped a constitutionally mandated process. You know, the peaceful transition of power as required by the Constitution. That's the part you're missing. So funny that the left goes wackadoodle over January the 6th, but does not say one thing about the burn, loot, murder, Antifa riots which went on all summer. Absolutely incorrect. The left has consistently said those that riot, burn, loot are doing things incorrectly and should be held accountable for their actions. But considering that Black Lives Matter protests overall had 26 million people in 40% of the counties in the United States of America, I don't see 40% of the country burned down. So Black Lives Matter, which has been 97% overall peaceful protest, gets to continue protesting. However, those that burn, loot, murder, etc., feel free to arrest them and hold them accountable. And I'm saying the same thing to your party. I'm not saying that the Republican Party never gets to hold a rally again, never gets to hold any kind of campaign organization where thousands of people can come and cheer for their candidate. I am saying that the idiots who stormed the Capitol during January the 6th and committed an insurrection, they get to get held accountable. But I'm not talking about banishing the Republican Party from ever organizing again just because some of their members broke the law. My position is consistent. I hope you can say the same thing. You can't call yourself a progressive after voting for Hillary and Biden, dear Lord, from Dave, not the rave. So I supported Bernie during both of the primaries. However, I will never let perfection be the enemy of improvement. Considering my option was Donald Trump, yes, I identify as a progressive. I fought for the progressives during the campaign, during the primary season. Once I lost, like a big boy, I voted for the better of the two options I had left. Could I have voted third party? Yes. In the United States of America, is a third party vote viable in the vast majority of elections? No, not remotely, because of the way our system is set up. Now, Medicare for all in favor. Raising the minimum wage, all in favor. Reducing the military industrial complex, all in favor. If the Republicans want to run a Teddy Roosevelt again, hey, I'll move back to voting for a Teddy Roosevelt again. increasing worker rights and breaking up strong monopolies and all that sort of stuff. But I'm not going to just sit by and let the worst option win because I have to be too ideologically pure, because it has to be perfect before I step in and vote. I don't consider that a realistic position to hold. What's progressive about... Oh, okay, so you're referring to Dave, not the rave, so I'll let you two go at it. Progress means improving. Socialism has a history of complete and utter failure. It's nice that you believe that. Again, the strong... What's hilarious to me is that, like, you know, the conservative agenda in this country is to, like, take us back to the 1950s, like, economically, right? You know, 2 cars in the garage, a single person in the household can work and provide for his entire family. In the conservative mindset, that's the man, but it doesn't have to be just a single person, right? Well, what's hilarious is to get back to that, we taxed the hell out of the super wealthy. We had a stronger social safety net, right? We had extremely strong unions and not right to work, right? It's all the stuff that they think is bad that they can't justify. Capitalism and human freedom are the greatest wealth builders ever. If we move away from that, we are courting disaster. Yes, and call me crazy, but when like 10 people in the entire world have 50% of the world's wealth, we could do with a little bit of rebalancing. This is where you're missing the point, Scrub Lord. I'm not saying get rid of capitalism entirely. I'm saying we've gone overboard and that capitalism is a religion direction. There are certain fields where capitalism does not apply as a model. Failed path. Europe? Question mark. Compared to the United States, Europe is socialist and we are doing fine. Stalin and Pol Pot is not socialism. From Dave, not the rave. Correct. Would you consider free healthcare and free education socialism? From Scrub Lord, Europe is not socialist. Does the government own the means of production? No, it's a high-tax, capitalist-based region. Okay, so if you don't want to consider Scandinavia socialist, then what the hell are you scared of? Because nobody over here, no realistic political candidate in the United States of America is advocating for anything further than Scandinavia. If the word socialism scares you, fine. Let's look at individual policies. Europe has more economically left-leaning policies, progressive, I'll stay away from that scary S word for you, than the United States currently does. And that's what the people over here are advocating for that you are so scared of. So if that's not a problem for you, then quit letting the boogeyman keep you up at night. I don't see the American Communist Party getting elected anytime soon. Nor would I want that personally. Laugh my ass off. The left never condemned BLM, Antifa. Now you're just lying. The left has consistently said that BLM's protests are overall peaceful. So of course we're not going to condemn BLM. I didn't condemn BLM. Open your ears. I condemned the people that descended into riots and looting. The left has also consistently said that Antifa is not an organization, and every time we ask you guys to point to the leader of Antifa or how I can move up in the ranks, you can't do it. But yes, you have just heard it now here. I am condemning political violence. That is not difficult. You have heard somebody on the left. If you have never heard it before, sir, you have now heard somebody on the left condemn political violence. There you go. How hard was that? Okay, that's Dave, not the rave. Scrub Lord, I don't know who you're referring to. Dave, not the rave. Say what you like about the orange clown. At least he didn't start any new wars. I agree with you to a point. The issue I have is that by pulling out of Syria, he created a power vacuum and made the situation worse there. Also, there was drone strikes went up hugely under Trump. But I do agree we didn't have boots on the ground, and I'm glad we didn't invade an Iraq or an Afghanistan or anything else again. For Afghanistan, I was okay with. not with staying the length of time we did, but with the initial go in, get the Taliban, get Osama bin Laden, and get out, I was in favor of with post 9/11. Iraq was complete horse shit and fabrication. We should have never gone in, personally. So I do agree with you that in some regard he was right on that sense. I don't think he was right in how much power we abdicated going that direction. The USA are the richest country in the world. The people are the hardest working people in the world. It's about time the government gave the people their due. Free healthcare and free education to start. I love you guys, left and right. You're all sound, all American. Get alone. I'm not sure what get alone means. Yes, the United States is the richest country in the world. I don't know that I would agree with the hardest working, but we are extremely productive overall. I think you could make the argument for most productive, but I'd have to see the statistics on that. That's not taking away from the United States or anybody else. I just don't know how you would fairly compare the United States to, slave labor in North Korea. So those people do exist, right? I think it's way too concentrated at the top right now. And considering most other, especially European democratic countries, Western European democratic countries, provide free health care, provide free upper level education. I do not see why we would want a dumber population, a less educated population than other countries we are competing with economically on the world stage, or why we would want a sicker population, less healthy population, a population that dies sooner and pays more per person for the privilege to die sooner than other European countries we consider our contemporaries. We're in the top 5 off the top of my head, spending per capita on healthcare per person. And we're down in the 30s, like 34, 36 in life expectancy. We spend more and we get less. So yeah, broadly, I agree with you. And I think at that point, I have caught up with chat. I know that was a quick rundown for everybody. From Barbara, because sick care is big business. You are absolutely correct. And the people that are arguing against Medicare for all or against universal health care in some way, shape, or form either don't know what they're talking about, or they do know, but they're in favor of insurance companies. So you're either ignorant or pro medical insurance companies. And neither one of those is a position that I think is tenable, not when you dive into it. Now, the specifics on how you want to do a universal health care, yeah, there's a lot of discussion to be had there. But the basic concept of maybe we shouldn't apply capitalism to healthcare in the broad sense, because if I have a heart attack right now, my partner, if she stops to call 5 different ambulance companies to figure out which one's the cheapest and which one's the closest and make a chart to make an informed buying decision, if I survive that heart attack, I'm not going to be very happy with her. Like I said, there are some industries where capitalism applies perfectly or makes sense. If you want to go cross shop for an iPhone or an Android or the 15 different models of Android and make your smart, informed buying decision because you have the time, that makes perfect sense to me. I understand that. But when your house is burning down or when your uncle's having a heart attack, nobody's stopping and providing that education or taking the time to gain that education to make that informed buying decision. that capitalism requires to be successful for the consumer. From Hoser for Life, my partner, I almost thought you were going to say he. Whoo, I'm just kidding, man. Nope, not me. But I'm with you. I don't have a problem with it. Whoever wants to be partners with whoever, as long as everybody's of the age of consent, that's fine with me. Canadian Zombie, okay, liberal. Hey, glad I could make both sides unhappy. I personally identify as a progressive, but for the most part, I ditch labels because I think individual policy positions are more important, and I'm going to vote for whoever holds the most policies that agree with me. Though admittedly, those policies have some form of hierarchy. If you're fine with undercutting American democracy overall, then you and I are going to have an issue. That's just the reality of it. Hoser for Life, you missed my BLM comment. It's short. I can easily name one of the leaders of BLM, Patrisse Cullors. That said they are trained Marxist. I don't know exactly what a trained Marxist would be. I don't think Marx is around training anybody, and I don't know any training camps for Marxists. But that would be separate from Antifa. So BLM has some national level organizers and then individual chapters at different local levels. That's completely separate than Antifa. That would be like me saying the Proud Boys in the Republican Party are equivalent. They're not the same thing. They might have some of the same goals and organizational, or some of the same goals, and some of the same members might be members of both, but that doesn't make them the same organization. So I'm not sure exactly what you're addressing. I acknowledge that, BLM has an organizational structure. Antifa is what I'm unaware of having a leader like the Proud Boys does, or am unaware of having a way to move up like you can in the Proud Boys, right? Gavin McInnes, as we saw in the trailer, which I'll probably hear when we hit the break in a second, has specifically said, that to move to the fourth degree or whatever in the Proud Boys, you have to commit an act of violence in the name of the cause. So you have to commit political violence, right? He said that on Joe Rogan's show. Okay. So that's different. You're talking a whole different level of organization than comparing to Antifa. But thanks for pointing it out. Marxist bad, the media told me so, from Canadian Zombie. She specifically said trained, her words. Fair enough. I don't know her. What does trained Marxist mean, though? Where do I apply for Marxist training? Again, for Canadian Zombie. Yeah, I'm unfamiliar with it. But I wouldn't doubt it. I mean, maybe she read a few books and went and sat in a book club or something. I don't know. I don't know what she did. Assuming it's a she, I'm going off your words here. From Barbara, I have been a liberal Dem for 45 years, and I never heard of Antifa until a year ago. That's because you're not going to see as many anti-fascists until the fascists start coming out. That's just my personal bet. My favorite, personally, Barbara, is the ones that'll walk around with the shirts that say anti-Antifa, right? Not realizing that anti-fascist, you could just wear a shirt that said fascist and accomplish the same thing. But at least they're close to showing their full colors. It's overly selective outrage. How can you seriously suggest the insurrection was the worst thing to happen, which seems to be the narrative? There is literally video of people that got into the building, walking along the velvet rope in orderly fashion, being guided by security. Doesn't sound like chaos to me. Police literally let them in the building. The left wants us to believe, not our eyes. No, my argument would be that you are selectively looking at the video evidence that supports your case and ignoring all the cases that do not. We know we have the video of the Trump supporters outside of the Capitol breaking through the barricades, and then one barricade being removed because they said, fuck it, we got to run back to our next defensive positions, right? We have the video of Trump supporters bashing down windows and doors, of screaming out, Where the fuck is Nancy? Right? Of saying, hey, we're here. Maybe we should just set up a government. Right? I can acknowledge that some of the people, when they got in, were in awe. Holy shit, I'm in the Capitol. And walked along a velvet rope. That doesn't change the fact that others were bashing down doors to try to get into the Senate or the House. That's where Ashley Babbitt got shot, right? Could see armed security. My bet is Secret Service, and they'll never tell us, right? But could see armed security on the other side of the door with the door barricaded. We can see the officers who got trapped in doorways, being crushed. So the fact that you can point to a few peaceful images doesn't erase all the violent ones. It doesn't mean those don't exist. And all of that is in support of stopping a constitutionally mandated process of verifying, validating the results of the United States federal election for president from the states. Now, to speak to your other point, that's what the narrative is from you. That is the opinion my research has led me to. It's not a narrative. That's why you can call in next week after you've had a week to do your research on this topic. You can send me anything you need me to potentially play on stream for you. And the number's toll free to call in, and we go over the previous week's topic if you want to go over it. This isn't like Ben Shapiro, where I'm going to jump up here and rant for 3 hours straight with no interaction with those who disagree with me. Because I think a big problem in this country right now is that a lot of conservatives and a lot of liberals or a lot of leftists don't talk to each other. And you have a perception of what you think I believe, like Scrublord did, right? And that's not the reality of what the majority of us believe. And that's true both directions. And this show is my small part in trying to get us talking to each other again. And evidence and reality will never be ignored by me in support of my ideology. My ideology will adapt and change based off of the evidence. If you want to change my mind back to being a conservative again, because I knocked on doors for George Bush the first time around, the son, I was too young for the dad, you can change my mind. But it's not going to be by convincing me to ignore the evidence that exists. It's going to be by presenting better evidence and better arguments. From Canadian Zombie, have you seen the video where the dude's trying to break through a window and get shot in the head? So peaceful. Exactly. That was Ashley Babbitt who got shot in the head, who happened to be former Air Force, if I remember correctly, and had voted for President Obama twice before that until she got wrapped into the MAGA bullshit and QAnon bullshit. Okay, but by the same token, I can suggest that those examples were the ones that were focused on over the peaceful ones from Hoser, so it's the opposite application. So this is where we disagree. So if I break into your house and shoot your wife in the head and eat a sandwich, what events out of those three do you think the police should focus on? Because I don't give a shit if you break into my house and eat a sandwich if you also murdered my partner, right? If you murdered my significant other, I'm going to want the police to focus on that first, the violence first. Then I'll deal with the breaking into the house part, and then I'll deal with the eating of the sandwich part. I'm not going to say, oh, well, you know, I've got him on webcam eating a sandwich, so it wasn't really that bad. I'm not saying that you didn't eat the sandwich. I'm not saying that people didn't walk along a velvet rope. I'm prioritizing here. And I'm saying that the fact that you ate a sandwich or you walked along a velvet rope doesn't excuse the other actions that took place in the building. Doesn't come close to it. And if I have documented evidence, let's say hypothetically you managed to not kill my significant other. But if I had documented evidence that that's what you were trying to do when you broke into my house and ate the sandwich and stole my TV, yeah, that's what I'm going to be most concerned with. And then the stealing of my TV and then the breaking into my house, and the sandwich is going to be way down the list, my man. That's what I'm saying. Canadian Zombie 5. Police let the insurrectionists in, but were violent during the anti-status quo protests last year. Curious. So to be as charitable, so A, I agree with you. During the BLM protest, we had a hell of a lot more police presence, National Guard presence, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera, in Washington than we did for the January the 6th protest, right? To be as charitable as possible from what I've seen so far, A, this is why we need an investigation into the whole thing, bipartisan, from Congress, something the Republicans blocked, not the Democrats, right? B, what I've heard is that because of the overreaction during BLM, that was why there was a contraction. There were less boots on the ground as it was for the January the 6th protest. I'm currently taking that with a grain of salt, but I am open to the possibility. I just need to research it more. Hoser for life. I got to say, man, I'm enjoying this back and forth with you, as am I with you. You're being very civil. Like I said, disagreements are welcome here as long as we're basing off of reality and we're civil. And one thing is I try to make very clear, right? I know it can come across as aggressive sometimes because I've done my research on these things and I am very strong in what I believe. It is possible to change my mind. Okay. I don't expect to change your mind live on stream, right? But maybe you'll have time to go back and research and look at what I've said and et cetera, and kind of analyze and come back and call in and all that sort of stuff is fine. And I would do the same thing for you, plant that seed, right? But as long as you're civil, you are more than welcome here. That is the goal, is to get us talking to each other. I have several conservatives who regularly call in at this point, one of who's called in 5 or 6 times. I don't think he's in the stream today. He's actually going to be made a moderator. I have a progressive and now a conservative, he's agreed to it, moderator for this show. And if you find yourself losing a particular argument to me and you have a buddy that makes the argument better than you do, get them in here. I'm not trying to duck the conversation or duck the argument. The whole goal is for us to find reality and truth and to make the country great, right? That's the whole point. And we don't do that by playing team over reality or team over country. Politics isn't LSU versus Alabama. Because I'm from Louisiana originally, and I'm not taking the LSU jersey on and ever putting on an Alabama jersey. I mean, that's not negotiable. But politics shouldn't be that. If Republicans turn around and run Teddy Roosevelt tomorrow, unless the Democrats run somebody better, I'm voting for Teddy Roosevelt. It's that simple. That's why I left the Republican Party. It kept moving further and further right, and I moved a little bit further left than I originally started out at. But it's not about the party for me. I'm following the policies. Period. Full stop. From Hoser for Life, I have no desire to be otherwise. Well, I appreciate it because I'm assuming you're referring to the civil comment. All right, we're going to take another 5-minute break. Then we'll run, and Hoser, you'll want to stick around for this because I don't know that you saw it at the beginning. Then we'll run the clip that shows the current Republican congressman saying that this was just tourists in the White House or in Congress, and we'll show the direct response to that and what actually happened. And then we're probably going to wrap up after that, but we'll answer any final questions. So again, 5 minutes, and then we'll be back shortly after that. Thank you, everybody. The time for silence is over.
But are you willing tonight to condemn white supremacists and militia groups?
I came here to speak on behalf of Donald Trump.
Do it, sir.
Say it. Do it. Say it. You want to call them, what do you want to call them? Very fine people on both sides.
And for the white Christian people of this nation.
Give me a name. Give me a
White
name.
supremacists and
white
supremacists and right
Proud
militia.
Boys, stand back and stand by.
In fourth degree, you get arrested or in a serious violent fight for the cause.
Really?
Yes. I'm taking the low road. I'm punching them in the face.
So that.
I attacked a couple guys.
Very fine people on both sides.
So I punched him in the face and I ripped his mask off. And then I punched him again.
President Trump retweeted a video showing a supporter making a racist statement.
White power! White power!
Very fine people on both sides.
Did Hitler do anything wrong? No! Fuck no! First precept of the truth of right. Remember it. Yes, the guy's
Let's have trial by combat. And after this, we're going to walk down, and I'll be there with you. We're going to walk down to the Capitol.
Are you willing tonight to condemn white supremacists, right
Proud
militia?
Boys, stand back and stand by.
Because you'll never take back our country with weakness. You have to show strength, and you have to be strong.
Join me every Sunday afternoon for a new show where common citizens, you and I together, discuss with each other issues of today, where we demand proof and evidence is required, where we seek the truth and will not be silent. Join me this coming Sunday afternoon and take part in America's oldest and most honored tradition.
This hearing is called the Capitol Insurrection. Let's be honest with the American people. It was not an insurrection, and we cannot call it that and be truthful. The House floor was never breached. And it was not an insurrection.
While we're here, we might as well set up a government. Hey, let's take a seat, people!
But let me be clear. There was no insurrection, and to call it an insurrection, in my opinion, is a bold-faced lie.
At 2:07, a mob of Trump supporters breached the steps. I don't know who did a poll that is Trump supporters.
There's a fucking million of us out there, and we are listening to Trump. You're the boss. It's sad. It's sad.
I've repeatedly asked for the Capitol footage from before and during January 6th. Such footage would provide answers, could contain exculpatory evidence regarding the outrageous accusations against members of Congress, and most importantly, exonerate the many Americans who peacefully protested and never set foot in the Capitol.
Democrats have said the events of the Capitol on January 6th were an assault on our democracy.
Where the fuck are they? Where are they?
And if that's true, if disorderly conduct in a restricted building is an assault on democracy.
While we're here, we might as well set up a government. Hey, let's take a seat, people! Let's take a seat! Hey, Nancy Pelosi. Let's vote on some shit! Where the fuck is Nancy?
Then what do we call setting fire to a federal court in Portland, Oregon, where people inside, what do we call that?
Well, guess what? America showed up!
19 people died during BLM riots last year. Hundreds and hundreds were injured. 2,000 police officers were injured from BLM riots last year. And yet, we're going to discuss today, as if none of that happened, the events of January the 6th. The hypocrisy of this body is indeed disturbing.
Thank you, everybody, for sticking with me through the break. If you enjoyed the conversation, like, follow, subscribe. Doesn't mean you agree with every view I hold, but it does mean you appreciate the conversation and want to be a part of it moving forward. Hoser for life. I hope you stuck around for that. I appreciate you being here. Barbara, thank you for being here also. Canadian Zombie, I think you're new. I appreciate you dropping in. And everybody else that dropped in for a while, whether you agreed or disagreed, I appreciate you dropping by. For those of y'all who watched this after the stream was completed, thank you for taking the time. Every Sunday, 2 to 4 p.m. Pacific, I will be on the air. The conversation will always be open from last week. The number is always toll-free. 855-915-5338. 815-915-5338. Anybody who agrees or disagrees is more than welcome to call in. Preference is given to those who disagree. If you go to the website or the YouTube channel, every call I have had, the vast, overwhelming majority of which have been with conservatives, has been civil, and we have made progress in the discussion. There's one exception that I can think of off the top of my head, and that gentleman is welcome to call back in anytime. Maybe he can make some progress too. As always, I have been Chris, your host. This is The Left Speaks, and I appreciate your time and your participation. Thank you, and see you next weekend.